Okay, this video is called The Purpose of Education. It's a chapter from this book, Straight A at Stanford and on to Harvard, that I wrote. So the first quote is from John Boyd, American fighter pilot. And also, what's sort of the big picture of this chapter? It's about how stuff really happens in the real world of medicine. And I think there's some useful points in how this story plays out. Okay, my mom had surgery for colon cancer, and she'd been doing pretty well. You know, we had the best surgeon in the area had operated on her in Chicago. And, you know, my mom's a very funny lady. A typical situation would be my brother comes over with his girlfriend. She's wearing a mini skirt on a cold day, and my mom says, "Michelle, you're going to catch a cold in your pussy." And my mom was always joking like that. She's a lot of fun. I was at Harvard doing my fellowship, primarily at Brigham and Women's Hospital, but also rotating through Massachusetts General. And, you know, it'd been a long haul to get there. College, med school, residency, and fellowship were 14 years of training. And it was kind of fun learning all the cool new technical stuff in imaging-guided surgery. But, you know, it was lonely. At night, a man wants someone in bed to have sex with, and I was alone. On the bright side, medicine had helped me with the ladies. You know, I'm not the most attractive guy in the world. I'm starting to go bald, and those are some of the benefits of an education. You make a little money, you get, you know, and it adds to your skills. You're more able to help people. And, you know, men will chase a woman who is attractive to him, even if she's a lot less educated. And that's a lot of times the way a woman from lower middle class moves into an upper middle class income in her life. Women kind of handle romance like a job interview. You know, if you want her in bed, you're going to have to earn it. You're going to have to jump through more hoops than a dolphin at SeaWorld. You know, you have to show that you've got good manners, display some type of money-making skills, not embarrass her in front of her friends and family. She wants a challenge, a good catch, someone she could be proud of in front of her friends, not a slimy horn dog. And, you know, I had a girlfriend who was very far away, over 1,000 miles, and I knew she was just using me for my brain. I wished she would use me more often. And long-distance lovers are good for medical students and residents because you spend a lot more time dreaming about them than actually with them, so you have more time for your work and your studies. And some people say, you know, I shouldn't write about sex, and that parents don't like that. You know, sometimes younger students will read my books, but you know what? Parents should warn their kids about the dangers of sex and marriage. In high school, they put bananas on condoms, but they don't teach about marriage and divorce. Two of my male doctor friends went broke because of divorce. Bankruptcy is actually 3 of them now. And 2 of them committed suicide. It's an important subject. Kids should also be reminded that their parents love them the most out of all the people in the world. Learning how to figure out who your true friends are is a very important skill. Nowadays, and people are so stupid, they'll vote for a politician who not only hates them but wants to kill them. That's how stupid people are. Well, anyways, home is where the people live who you love the most, and for me that was Sweet Home Chicago. I knew next year would be better socially. I'll have a lot more free time. Being a fellow is kind of like an indentured servant. As usual for the fellowship, I had gotten home late from a long day at work, time to eat dinner, get ready to sleep, had a big day tomorrow, a lot of cases. And so my mom called and she said, "How do you like Boston?" And I said, "Ma, your voice sounds weak. Is something wrong?" "Mom, no, I'm just tired." I said, "Let me talk to Dad." Dad gets on the phone. Me. Something's wrong with Mom. Dad, "No, she's okay. She's just tired since surgery." I said, "Dad, check her blood pressure, her pulse, and her temperature." Dad comes back to the phone. Blood pressure is 90/60. Pulse 120. Temperature 102. I said, "Holy shit, Dad. She's in septic shock. Take her to the emergency room now." I knew my mother would be dead by tomorrow. Sometimes emergency room doctors are overwhelmed with too many patients and they're unprepared for additional patients, especially a complex one. Sometimes the on-call doctors and the CAT scan technologists don't call back for hours. They would usually be taking home call. The TV noise might drown out the sound of their pager, but that was not going to happen tonight. I called the emergency room doctor. I called the CAT scan technologist to make sure he was in-house, in the hospital, and to keep the scanner table open. I told the hospital operator to connect me directly to the home of the surgeon, and I told him to go to the emergency room. He's actually a friend of the family indirectly. I called the interventional radiologist on call and told him to go to the hospital and check the CAT scan and to be ready to drain an abscess. I flew standby to Chicago, and my brother drove us straight to the hospital. My mom had become unresponsive, was intubated, and put on a ventilator. The surgical bowel and anastomotic connection had broken apart, and the bowel contents were spilling into her abdomen. The surgeon had to cut open her abdomen and drain the abscess and reconnect the bowel. It was too advanced of a process with free intraperitoneal air to have undergone a percutaneous drainage. The ICU clerk told me that visiting hours were over and that I could see her tomorrow. I insisted on speaking to the head nurse, who also told me that I had to come back tomorrow. I called the doctor in charge of the ICU and overruled them both. Whenever you have a family member in the hospital, you want to be there. The hospital's a very dangerous place. I had a cot put into my mom's ICU room so I could sleep there. Patients wake up in the middle of the night confused, and they pull out their lines sometimes, or they fall out of bed. And also, my mom, Spanish is her first language. She sometimes talks Spanish. She's always making jokes. People might not understand her. And, I was afraid they'd end up sedating her because they think she's crazy or something. She's always making smart aleck comments and talking Spanish and stuff. I was not going to let that happen to my mother. She remained unresponsive for 3 days. Then her oxygen saturation started to improve, and the endotracheal breathing tube was removed. At this point, she had oxygen prongs in her nose from nasal cannula oxygen. She had a central line going down into her neck. She had an arterial line in the artery of her wrist. The oxygen saturation monitor was on her finger of her hand. She had a urinary drainage catheter, going into her bladder, Foley catheter. She had a surgical drainage tubes coming out of her belly from the surgery. And she had venous compression stockings to compress the legs, prevent DVT. So she opens her eyes and she says, "Why am I tied up like a goat?" I said, "Not much longer, Mom. You're going to be okay. We're going home soon." She made a full recovery, and Mother's Day was the best day of the year. And here's a picture a year later with her first grandchild.